Okay, so underrated motocross games, that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I do have a few in mind, but I kind of want to focus in on two. So the first one I want to talk about is Supercross Encore. I feel like that game is underrated. I get why. I get that players might not have liked that game very much because it did have a stupid clutch boost. It had a whip glitch and double preload where you could jump entire rhythm sections at a time. I get it wasn't that realistic, and the moto community really leans towards realism. They want a game that has more realistic in it. Not everybody, but if you look at comments and posts and opinions about motocross games, you know, it definitely leans towards realism. So I get why Encore maybe got that reputation. And it's okay. It still is my second favorite MX vs. ATV game of all time, but I did play it a bunch. I got pretty good at it, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed my time with that game, and I still enjoy coming back to it. It is one of the few games that I play that when I come back to it, I have a blast. I really, really enjoy myself when I come back to that game. So Supercross Encore, I do feel like, is heavily underrated or overlooked a bit as a motocross game. The number one underrated, overlooked motocross game, in my opinion, though, is this game that you're watching right now, MX vs. ATV Untamed. If you have not played this game, haven't heard of it, you have to find a way to try to play it. If you have an Xbox, you can get this game backwards compatible on the One X and maybe the new Xbox, the Series. I'm not sure, but I would assume. Definitely you need to try it out. It, in my opinion, is severely, mostly overlooked, but even underrated. When you see people comparing past games that they want to be incorporated or whatever, what is the number one game? Reflex, reflex, reflex. That's what the community leans to generally. MX vs. ATV Reflex, MX vs. ATV Alive, even MX Unleashed and MX vs. ATV Unleashed. Those are games that the community generally falls back on when they say a great MX vs. ATV game. And it's perfectly justified, for sure. Those are some of my favorite games. Reflex is my favorite game, but here you see we had all the vehicles in the game: monster trucks, trophy trucks, sandrails, dune buggies, UTVs. They were fun to use. The physics were fun. I mean, it had all the vehicles in it. As far as content goes, the tracks were great, showing you a bunch of different tracks, the Supercross tracks, the motocross tracks, the open world free ride areas were really fun. But back to the thought of the community feels like is great motocross games, and I'm not saying everybody, it's, I would say, a majority, at least from seeing opinions and comments and whatnot. The games that I mentioned with Reflex and Alive and Unleashed and even Supercross 1, Supercross 3, maybe MX GP3, MX Sim, MX Bikes. Those are games that the community really loves. I mean, they're not overrated, they're not underrated, they're just some of the best ever, you know? But this game, it does come up for content they want to see brought into new MX vs. ATV games or whatever, but I don't really see it now. Excuse me. I don't really see it brought up in favorite motocross games of all time when I see people talk about it. I mean, I'm sure it is for some people, for sure. And I'm sure it was a great game for some people. It was a great game for me, but it isn't my favorite one. But I still feel like it is underrated. It is overlooked. It did have different physics. You know, we went from MX vs. ATV Unleashed to this game, and the physics are free, but it did have a scrub button. So to whip, it never felt like you could throw monster whips in the game. It felt like Unleashed, but it was different. Again, the physics were different. The physics were stiffer. You had to use that scrub button to lean the bike and then really kick the back end out to try to get a whip in the game. And it works fine. I said that weird. Works fine. but it was different, and it was a push button. But the physics were still free. You did have control of the bike and rider in the air and on the ground, and the ground physics were great. And overall, I felt like the physics were good, but it was an adjustment from past games, right? And we had pit bikes with 2 dedicated tracks. We had enduro cross, you'll see a bit later, 2 dedicated tracks. The free ride worlds, again, motocross tracks, supercross tracks, iconic, great designs. We even had supermoto in the game. We even had supermoto. All the bikes, 2 strokes, 4 strokes, 125, 250, 2 strokes, 450, 250, 4 strokes, the quads. Now, the cool thing about the quad is it actually had a bit of a different sound to it than the bikes, if you remember right. So, I mean, it was similar, but it was tuned a bit different. The quads kind of had their own sound to them, which was really cool. I mean, there was a bunch of effort and passion and dedication that went into this game. And again, that is why I feel like it was a bit underrated. In my opinion, the most underrated game. The only other game that maybe I would say was kind of underrated would have been MTX. I felt like that game, I didn't really play that game much. I did play it a bit, but not very much. So I don't have much of an opinion on it. But I feel like that game goes a bit unnoticed as well. But like I said, I don't really have too much of an opinion on it because I didn't really play that game very much. So, but I feel like it could be in the conversation for underrated. So that's my opinion. I would be really curious to see what you guys think. What is your most underrated, overlooked game, motocross game that needs to be bought or tried or needs to be played because of how good it really is? The freestyle in this game was amazing. It was the best freestyle in any game, in my opinion. The tricks looked awesome. The combos were fun. The trick library was great and big, and the freestyle areas, arenas, and courses that they made were fantastic. I don't believe they made better freestyle areas than they did in this game. It was fantastic. The freestyle was fun, and that's coming from a guy that doesn't really care whatsoever about the freestyle. I mean, yeah, it's cool to have it in the game, and I know some players just care about the freestyle stuff, the tricks, but I don't really care about it. So coming from a guy that generally doesn't care about that stuff and saying that this was the best and I actually enjoyed my time in it and could actually do the tricks, I would say that's saying something. It is saying something. So yeah, again, let me know. I'm really curious. It's a discussion. I really want to have a discussion with you about what you guys think is the most underrated game. Now, I'm not saying that this game got a bad rating. I really don't know what the game rating on this game is. I don't know. I haven't checked. I don't know. I really don't know, but it does go unnoticed. It doesn't usually get brought up in the conversation for greatest motocross game ever made. It doesn't get brought up too often when making comparisons to things, and you know, I don't know why. I don't know if it just went under the radar for people to buy, if it was the physics in the game were a bit different. I mean, one thing I do want to mention that really doesn't have anything to do with anything is that the whoops in this game were insane. They were actually tough. In my opinion, they might be some of the toughest whoops in any, not maybe MX Sim, MX Bikes, but any other game. They were wicked tough. You had to get in those bad boys straight, and then the bike would pull to one side, and if you started getting out of control, it was very difficult to bring it back. Yeah, I mean, it was this game was still single stick control. So it was the left analog stick to control the bike. The right one just kind of controlled the camera, had all the camera angles. I mean, I just don't have enough good things to say about it. And in my opinion, yes, most underrated, overlooked motocross game of all time would be MX vs. ATV Unleashed. But again, it is just an opinion. And what I'm most curious about is to see what you guys think. What is your most underrated, overlooked motocross game that needs to be played, needs to be picked up, and needs to be tried at least once? I would really be curious to see. I know I keep saying in the comments, I've been really busy. I mean, we're getting to the holidays. I'm just super busy, but I do want to have a discussion, so let me know in the comments what you guys think. But you guys and girls are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for the support on the channel lately. It really does mean a lot. And until the next video, take it easy.